This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Nancy Benson. This week, brain aneurysm through the eyes of a survivor.
First of all, I called my mom to say goodbye because it was that bad that I thought, I'm going to die. This is the worst thing ever. And she said, go to the hospital. And I thought, it's a $50 copay. I'm not going to the hospital.
Relearning everything after a brain aneurysm when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Reed Pence, the producer and host of Radio Health Journal. If you like listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
The astronauts have to do around 2 hours of exercise every single day so they keep the loss of muscle and bone as minimal as possible.
What exactly happens to our bodies in space? What we do and don't know. Then,
when you're thinking about applying to graduate school or your career, it doesn't really matter where you started college. It does matter where you graduated from college.
Examining the hefty price tag of traditional higher education. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Radio Health Journal and Viewpoints on your favorite radio station. And subscribe and listen anytime on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Radio Health Journal.
Back in March of 2004, Janet Sutherland Madden was living in Columbus, Ohio, and having a lot of headaches. It happened every spring, so she didn't think much of it.
This time of year, most people have sinus infections or the flu. You're transitioning from winter to spring, and everyone comes down with the flu or sinus infections. I come down with sinus infections always. So I self-medicate, of course, and I go to urgent care to get antibiotics, but I have constant headaches. So I would just take aspirin and aspirin. I was taking aspirin and Tylenol like 3 and 4 times for a couple months.
But then one afternoon when she was out walking her dog, she suddenly had a headache that no aspirin could help. What she says was the worst headache of her life, the worst she could imagine. And she knew she was in deep trouble.
First of all, I called my mom to say goodbye because it was that bad that I thought, I'm going to die. This is the worst thing ever. And she said, you're having a stroke. Go to the hospital. And I thought, it's a $50 copay. I'm not going to the hospital. Dumb. So I called 911 when it was rupturing.
911, what is your emergency? I'm at home. I have the worst headache on my planet. I need help. Is anybody there with you? No, I'm by myself. Okay. Is your door unlocked? Yeah, I'll go unlock it. Please help me. We'll get them here for you, okay? Please help me. All right. Bye.
The operator told me to open the door, my apartment door, and I did, and they came and found me in my kitchen, and I was having a seizure.
But though Janet was unconscious by then, paramedics had a good idea what was going on, and that they had to get her to the hospital fast. She'd passed along to the 911 operator one key piece of information.
The worst headache of my life, yes. That's the trigger of any EMT or any paramedic, any firefighter that hears that on the scanner. They'll immediately know that's a brain aneurysm rupturing.
As Janet explains in her book, Nose Over Toes, an aneurysm is a ballooning of a blood vessel. About 30,000 brain aneurysms rupture each year and are the most common cause of a type of stroke called a subarachnoid hemorrhage. Most aneurysms are not at risk of bursting, but many people unknowingly have them.
1 in 50 people have brain aneurysms. A brain aneurysm ruptures every 18 minutes. African Americans will rupture twice as many times as Caucasians. That also includes Latinos. So there are unknowns out there that people are not aware of.
African Americans are at greater risk of a rupture because they suffer from high blood pressure at about twice the rate of whites. Unfortunately, ruptured brain aneurysms are fatal about 40% of the time. When Janet arrived at the hospital, doctors said she only had about a 3% chance of survival. So why did she live when so many others don't?
I asked that same question, and they say my age and my health condition was pretty good. I called 911, and the paramedics got to it in time because they knew that it was a brain aneurysm. which was lucky. And they had been trained in a class knowing how to recognize a brain aneurysm. That's the key there, and that's why it is almost a miracle, is they got to me in time and they got me to the right hospital in time, and doctors knew that it was a brain aneurysm. There are statistics that show that a lot of fatalities occur because people do not get to the hospital in time and die.
However, her recovery was rough. She was in a coma for 3 weeks and woke up in less than perfect shape.
My hands are tied to the bed. I'm blind, but I don't want to tell everyone I'm blind because I'm hearing how distraught everyone was. And I thought, hate to tell everyone that I can't see. I live, but I can't. My legs are falling out of the bed, and my arms are falling out of the bed. I can't see. This was right after the Iraq War started, and I thought, well, I'm obviously a prisoner of war. My doctor I thought was Saddam Hussein. It was Dr. Shahadi, and I thought, geez, I must be in Iraqi prison camp or something. I was very delusional, and it was very scary for everyone, and it was just confusing for me, and I couldn't see a number when it was up, so I faked that I could see. I used my nose and my ears.
About 2/3 of those who survive a ruptured brain aneurysm will suffer a brain impairment of some type. Janet recovered her sight, but with damage in the right side of her brain, her left side remained partially paralyzed. Today, she walks with a cane. But she says it might have been worse. After doctors repaired that artery, they discovered she had another one threatening to explode on the other side.
There was an aneurysm on the left side. The left side would affect the cognitive and my ability to talk. I didn't find out that they didn't do anything about the left side. They saw the left side aneurysm when they clipped the right side, and then they decided to wait until it healed to take care of the left side. When I found out how the left side would affect me, I said, fix that right away, because I don't want to lose the ability to talk or anything, because I knew my chances of working or anything were going to be done. So they coiled, which is a slinky, that they put in the aneurysm.
And then began the long, grueling task of rehab.
I will tell people, you really don't realize how strong you are when you are handed something that's massively challenging, and you think, well, I've got to get myself out of this.
As she recovered, it's no surprise that Janet wondered what had triggered her aneurysm. They run in families, but since she'd been adopted, she didn't know if that was true in her case. Her adoption agency tracked down her birth mother, who said that, yes, many women in her family had died of a stroke around age 40. But Janet says insurance won't pay for MRI screening based just on family history, even if it could prevent disaster. And she says it also often won't pay for needed assistive devices after the fact.
I have a brace in my leg. It wasn't approved by insurance companies because they don't recognize brain aneurysms as much as they should. I paid $5,000 out of my own pocket because there's not enough awareness for brain aneurysms.
Janet Sutherland Madden's book, Nose Over Toes, is available now. You can find out more about it and all our guests at our website, radiohealthjournal.org. Our studio producer is Jason Dickey. I'm Nancy Benson. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
What's coming out of that bottle could be great. It could be terrible. We'd never know.
Many Americans are convinced that tap water is dangerous and bottled water is better.
Then, the fight after COVID against PTSD.
When someone gets a ventilator put on them, it can be very traumatizing because you're not just dealing with the discomfort, but also confronting the reality that you very well may die.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Radio Health Journal is a production of MediaTrax Communications. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.